Welcome to Conversation with a Geographer. I'm Mike DeVivo, Professor of Geography at Grand Rapids Community College. And today, we're very fortunate to have Rebecca Lave, Professor of Geography at Indiana University. Rebecca, thanks so much for being here.
It is my pleasure, Mike.
Wonderful. As I've started this show with many others, I'll ask you to, reflect on some of your experiences before pursuing your graduate studies in geography, and maybe comment upon your childhood, your undergraduate work, and your graduate studies, and try to get an idea as to what really inspired you to pursue geography as a career. Would you care to share?
So, I didn't know really anything about academic geography for a long time in my life. I will just say I'm one of those people who somehow managed to avoid any education about the environment generally for an appallingly long time. So I did my college education, my major. I did an interdisciplinary major at Reed College that was political philosophy and art history. And what I was trying to think about was architectural determinism and the idea that the way you designed public space could control what was happening within it. And so I did my senior thesis on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. And when I was looking for literature that talked about the social construction of space, right? Then I found geography. So it was one of those things for me of like, my senior year in college, I'm trying to figure out how to write about this and suddenly stumble on Lave. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is what I was trying to do. Yeah.
So you were a Reedy, and
yes.
Was the library open 24 hours a day when you went to read?
So they would close it at midnight on Fridays and Saturdays, maybe 2 a.m. to try to make us all go home. But it sounds like you're familiar with Reed. Are you a Reedy?
No, I'm not a Reedy, but
okay.
Its reputation is stellar, and for a number of years, Reed had some of the highest number of or proportion of graduates that would go on to grad school or law school or MBAs. I think more law school and grad school than anything else. I think it was Reed and Oberlin were tied or shifting places for many years.
Yeah. No, it was an extremely academic place.
Had you been raised in that part of the country?
No, I'm from Southern California, but I am a faculty brat. Both of my parents run the faculty in the School of Social Sciences at UC Irvine. But there was no geography at Irvine either.
No.
So it was kind of a new thing for me. I definitely, I went to a sort of hippie elementary school where we didn't have playground equipment. We had the chaparral, the hills of Southern California. So I feel like I was very deeply interested in the world around me, and particularly in streams, I have to say. We had an intermittent stream that went through the school. So I was very impressed both by, what it was like most of the year when there was hardly any water at all. And then what it was like when it flooded. That made a really big impression on me as a kid. But yeah, I feel like I sort of stumbled into geography and was like, oh, thank goodness. Like, this is what this is what I was looking for.
But from Reed, where did you go?
Yeah. So I actually probably should have said one more thing, which is that, I took time off between high school and college, and then between college and my master's, and then between my master's and my PhD. I'm not a straight pipe kind of person, I guess I'll say, not my temperament. So after college, I did not make any moves towards grad school. I was really happy. I was living in Portland. Portland in the 90s was amazing. I had no desire to go anywhere. And so I stayed there for a couple of years and ended up kind of randomly with a temp job at the city of Portland in their planning department, which I found very interesting. And so when it came time to apply for graduate school, I applied to UBC geography, and I applied to planning school at MIT, and then I applied to the history of consciousness program at UC Santa Cruz, which are very, very different things. and thought, oh, well, the application process will make the decision for me. And then had just that kind of weird luck of getting into all three and then being like, oh, what do I do? So I really wasn't interested in being an academic. I had academic parents and I didn't like their lives. I didn't want to live like they were living. And so I took the city planning and urban design route, and I went and did a degree in that. And then just happened to have the luck of taking my first environmental science class as part of that degree and being like, what? We're doing what to the planet? I don't know how I had really, I mean, I knew kind of from just reading the newspaper, but I'd never really focused on it before.
And this was in MIT.
It was at MIT, yeah. And the issues that just totally called to me the most were ones about fresh water, and particularly rivers and streams. So I was very lucky to get urban planning, urban and environmental design jobs that focused on rivers. So first in Boston and then in the Bay Area in California. And at some point I had a project where, and let me just say, in those kinds of urban design and planning projects, the planning firm is almost always the lead of the team of sub-consultants. So I was managing a geomorphology consultant who was talking with me about stream restoration. And that was the moment in which I started thinking about, like, wow, this is not just the science of stream restoration, right? There are all these political, economic, and other kinds of concerns that come in as well. And by that point, I had gotten fairly bored with urban planning. I'd been doing it for a solid 5 years and just felt like, this is not my cup of tea. And so I decided to apply to graduate school. And since I was already living in Berkeley, that's where I applied. I didn't want to move. But I thought that geography was still strongly interdisciplinary, because what I wanted to do was to think about how the political economy of stream restoration physically changed streams. Like, that's what I wanted to focus on. So that
was your idea from the get-go, from entering the doctoral program, was to really look at policies associated with stream restoration.
Let me just say, I should say that I thought my original project was going to be restoration of the Tijuana River and estuary. So I wasn't necessarily just rivers, but freshwater systems and their interaction with federal policy was definitely what I was thinking about. And then, I got to UC Berkeley, and like most geography departments at that time, the physical geography and human geography was really separate. And so what I thought I wanted to do was sort of greeted with consternation by the initial advisors I had. But Michael Johns, who was the chair of the department at the time, kind of went to bat for me and just said, no, like that's an okay thing to do, which was great. And then also the physical geographers were very supportive. I mean, once they stopped laughing, that, like, here was this graduate student showing up with very little background in physical science, saying that she wanted to take physical science classes. They let me in their classes. So I was able to get, a pretty, I don't know what to say exactly, reasonably solid education in geomorphology and hydrology. Not enough ever to call myself a geomorphologist, but enough that I can understand concepts and analyze data and
engage in dialogue with other geomorphologists.
Yeah. Yep. And so that was just immensely valuable to me. I'm so grateful to those people, Kurt Cuffey, Bill Dietrich, Matt Condolf, who let me into their classes. So I don't think my advisor realized exactly what I was doing until my qualifying exams, when all of a sudden I was up at the whiteboard doing shear stress equations, and he was just like, oh, okay. That was not what he was, it's not the normal political ecology route, but that's the route I went.
Let's talk about your advisor. Would you care to discuss how he engaged in mentoring with you and how he guided you in your research?
Yeah. So Michael Watts tends to give people a lot of room and a lot of independence, which, particularly suited me as an older student. I was, many people start graduate school at like 22. I was starting at 30 after already having been a senior associate in a planning firm and was used to a lot of responsibility and a lot of independence. Michael had a lot of students. I forget what the total is, but it was something over 100 by the time he retired, PhD students. So it's, he had a lot going on. The moment where Michael really intervened with his students was learning to write funding proposals. So that was, incredibly useful. We went through draft after draft after draft. But for the most part, I worked pretty independently. He's a really insightful commenter on drafts of things. So that was really valuable, but I was doing work that was pretty different from his kind of normal interests, maybe is the fairest way to say. Like, I wasn't an Africanist. I was doing all this physical science stuff. Yeah.
It was a different kind of field work combined with your perspective from your experience in planning, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely helped a lot, right? I mean, a lot of the people, so my dissertation, a lot of the research was interviews with practitioners and agency staff. And, I'm sure it helped that I was used to talking with those people in my work, right? I had never met any of them before, but I had been a consultant myself and worked in that realm and worked a lot with federal agency and state agency staff. And so that was a very familiar world to me.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you share with us a few words about your dissertation? It's fascinating.
Sure. Oh, thank you for that. I got super fascinated by a fight in the stream restoration world in the U.S. over the work of a man named Dave Rosgen, who was a private consultant. He started out with the Forest Service, but then he went on his own. So he was a full-time teacher and consultant on stream restoration. And, it's one of those things where he himself had been trained by Luna Leopold, who was this incredibly revered figure in geomorphology and hydrology. But he was not an academic. And yet he came up with the system for classifying streams. And then more importantly, I think the education system that trained the majority of stream restoration practitioners in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, he managed to really, really deeply upset the academic stream, community of river scientists, because he did not have the training and he did not convey what he was doing through academic papers and things. And, to learn what he was recommending, you had to pay lots of money to go to these short courses. And so there was a very organized academic opposition to him. And there was this fight that I wrote about that was people referred to it as the Rosgen Wars. And, it was just really interesting as a case in which you really saw the kind of limits of the legitimacy of academic science, right? That this person who eventually did earn a PhD, but in the British system, which doesn't involve lots of coursework, right? So there were some Americans had questions about his PhD, but you had this huge conflict in which academia clearly lost, like just no question, right? They were not able to delegitimize this guy. And he, Dave Rosgen is still a very, very influential person. Yeah. So that was my dissertation. It was fascinating.
It's really intriguing that the academics decided not to lend any legitimacy to Rosgen or those that embraced his methods, his strategies, and the way in which streams were classified. And I believe you might have mentioned that. I don't know if we could call his followers his disciples, but those that embraced his model essentially and admitted to many of the flaws in the system just weren't better alternatives that academics offered.
Yeah. So there definitely weren't academic, there weren't strong academic alternatives. And there's still, there's starting to be stronger academic training in stream restoration, but it's still pretty rare. Mm-hmm. Which is pretty striking. I do think that some of the animosity has died down. There are still some people that are kind of actively anti-Rosgen, but I think my sense is that most of the river science community has just kind of let that one go and started thinking about other things. And what I see in practice is that it's still pretty common for people to use natural channel design, which is Roskin's method, use that approach. But people are also layering lots of other things with it and other ways of understanding river channels. And yeah, so I think we're past that moment where that was the only game in town, and it wasn't a game that the many river scientists liked.
Well, and that also reveals to us that, knowledge is the attainment of knowledge is rather fluid. And we achieve more knowledge when we analyze the natural environment through some evolution of knowledge. And as we engage in more field work, more analysis. But it occurs to me, as you devoted yourself really to this debate or this argument of sorts, you find yourself in an academic department at Indiana characterized by debate, argument, and perhaps even despair in some ways in your early years. And you've recounted this experience in your presidential columns. If you would, please share with us, the nature of that early experience upon your assistant professorship appointment.
Yeah. So I definitely had fair warning when I interviewed on that job, because quite a few of the faculty members, none of whom are at IU anymore, were really pretty mean when I interviewed, which, you think an interview is when people are supposed to be on their best behavior. But, not so much. I mean, I think that one of the moments that sticks with me the most is breakfast, the day after I gave my job talk. The person that took me to breakfast began the breakfast by sliding a piece of paper across the table and saying, "I really think you should look at this." And it was an advertisement for a different job, and it was one that was mostly administrative. Right. So the message was you aren't going to make it, kid. Let's see if we can find you a different career path. I think it was I think that person was actually really well-intentioned. He just was well, clearly this person is failing in academia and they're never, they're not going to get this job or any job. So I'm going to help her with a parachute, right? It was just really not a happy experience at all. So I guess I had some warning, but I was still super shocked at my first faculty meeting that, one person would be speaking about something and another person would be talking about what an idiot they were quietly to the person next to them while the person was talking. Just the animosity was really staggering. And there was another faculty member who started the same year that I did. And I just remember looking at her across the table and us both being oh, this is really, really scary. So for a couple of years, I mostly tried to keep my head down and keep out of the way. And then it all came to a head at one very dramatic moment when our new executive dean, who had just moved from University of Oregon, was going around and doing meet and greets with the departments. And, somehow he must have picked geography's name out of the hat. It was the first department he visited. So we're all kind of, dressed up and ready to talk to the new dean. And two of the atmospheric scientists hijacked the conversation and said, our current situation is untenable here, and we have begun negotiations to merge geography into geology. And this was news to everyone else in the room. And so, as you can imagine, all hell breaks loose. The dean is just standing there staring at us. It's people are yelling and upset, and it was really quite something. So basically, they just really didn't want to be in a department with social scientists in it. They didn't want, they were upset, understandably upset, that their course load was higher than other atmospheric scientists and on campus, that they, weren't paid as much, right? Physical geographers are accepting a compromise when they stay in geography departments. And I'm so grateful that so many of them do. But I can understand why these people were upset, even if I really don't agree with how they went about trying to solve the problem. But anyway, big year of kerfuffle. Maybe the department's going to be closed. Lots of people left. And, when the dust cleared, there were 7 of us left, which is on the small side for a geography department at one of the Big Ten universities. That's small. And the university decided, or the College of Arts and Sciences decided not to close us. Instead, they said they would invest in us. And so we tried to figure out what our path forward was. And, there were two pretty clear paths, right? So one would have been to really double down and focus on climate and land use change, which all but like one or two people in the department worked on, and say to those two people, you can move to anthropology, bye. Or to try to come up with something that knitted us all together. And at that moment, we had an external review. It was great timing for the external review. And one of the things that you do in an external review, every faculty member is supposed to kind of present their vision for their work and their department and where they see that going. And I guess the people on the external review committee read those things. And Vicki Lawson took me aside and said, have you read everyone else's? And I said, no. And she said, well, you're the only person that's putting forward a vision for the department as a whole. She said, do you talk like in faculty meetings? Do you speak up? And I was like, absolutely not, man. That's a scary place. No. And she basically said, step up, like get moving, like get on it. And so I started jumping in on faculty governance in the department. And, I think we were really lucky in that the 7 people that were left were all really nice people. And I don't mean that say that in any kind of trivializing way. I think academia tends to emphasize this idea of like brilliance or superstar, which I just think is really unhelpful. And there's just a whole lot to be said for being a functional, competent, kind human being. Like departments just work so much better when that's the case. So it turned out that other people found this idea of going more interdisciplinary appealing. And so what we did was to get rid of, and I talk about this in my column, so I'll be brief here. We got rid of the kind of traditional physical geography, human environment, human geography split. And instead we organized around problems. So now we have climate and environmental change, water resources, food and agriculture, globalization and development. And in each of those clusters, we have people who would call themselves a physical geographer, a human environment geographer, or a human geographer, right? So we have these integrated, we've reorganized the department into an integrated way. So our curriculum is more integrated. And I'm sure we still have, we can still do more on that, right? Like, I don't think we've reached some like perfect panacea of interdisciplinarity, which is a terrible sentence, which I never should have said. But there's so much mutual respect in the department. And also a lot of epistemic humility, right? Nobody is saying, well, your work doesn't look like mine, therefore it must suck. And boy, is it great to be away from that. And to have this new sense of collegiality and being in this together. It really makes a big difference.
Well, that mutual respect and collegiality are imperative for, as you've indicated in your columns, the building of a vibrant department.
Yeah.
One that is destined for success, or seeks success anyway. And it tasks the departmental leaders, both those that are informal leaders behind the scenes and the formal leaders as chairs, to really engage in conflict resolution and to mitigate conflicts, if not resolve them, before they erupt into significant problems.
Yeah. I feel like there's just, I think particularly having been in the private sector where like there's just such a high value on polite behavior, like it is stunning to me that I feel like many academics don't get taught like basic courtesy and etiquette, and the idea that no matter how angry you are, it's not a good idea to explode in a professional situation. Right, that's just not an okay thing to do. And I think somehow people don't imagine that 30 years from now, they're going to be facing the same people across the conference table at faculty meetings, right? And so that bad behavior can really poison the well for you for a long time. Sorry, go ahead.
Arguably, the absence of etiquette, the misbehavior, we'll say, characterized by many miscreants, I should say, too, is reflective of insecurities among many in our field and in academia in general.
Yeah. And I just, I don't mean to harp on this, but I really do think there's not a very high premium on being nice in academia, and it's worth it. Like, kindness, I think, is such an important virtue in moving through the world. If you think about the ripples that you leave behind you in the world, like, if you have been good to other people, that is the kind, like, I'm not saying this very articulately. When I leave a room, I would much rather that someone felt that I had said something that made them feel happier about themselves and their work than that I had said something smart. Like, that's much more important to me.
Well, it's another interesting point that really should be accentuated, is this matter of being kind. Earlier, before you arrived in Berkeley, Jim Parsons was known as a very kind mentor.
Yeah.
With basically encouraging his students to complete their doctorates and offering wisdom in that completion, in the completion of many, I should say. As I've interviewed a number of individuals, some in private liberal arts colleges now, some in larger universities, those that have earned their PhDs in a number of institutions, there is this common theme of feeling supported and having interactions with kind colleagues and kind mentors. There is something to be said for being in an environment where one recognizes that people care.
Yeah.
Our discipline's history is tragically characterized by too many unkind departments.
Yeah. I mean, I think, is it Dostoevsky or Tolstoy? That's the unhappy families are all different one. Like, I think there are a lot of different ways to have a dysfunctional department. And I think there are fewer paths towards a functional department. Like, I think it's a little bit narrower, right? Like, you need to have that respect and that kindness, or you just don't get there, in my opinion. There are many, like, in terms of topic and content and organization, I think there's a lot of room.
Mm-hmm.
I think in terms of just being able to get to a strong functional department, boy, if you don't have that good behavior, I just don't see how you get there.
Mm-hmm. And you have this leadership role as an administrative leader now. Do you find yourself compelled to lend advice to department chairs and members of departments, faculty members of departments, to guide them in terms of practicing some form of etiquette and politeness, perhaps?
I think unsolicited advice is often not very welcome. So what I try to do as an associate dean, like, I consider it a service role. Like, I don't see it as I'm going to tell everybody else what to do. I see it as my job is to make chairs' lives easier and to help them make their departments better places. So I feel like my job is to spread appreciation and support, and also to try to model best practices and try to open up discussions among chairs about how they could do things differently. And I definitely try to support chairs and departments in doing things differently, but I don't feel like I'm out there like Johnny Appleseed trying to like spread that. I feel more like I'm trying to figure out, because I think this follows from what you said. When people feel supported, they have an easier time supporting other people, right? So I feel like my job is to start that chain of support.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very wise strategy. That's for sure. So you were elected vice president, then president of the AAG, serving as the leader, really, of arguably one of the most, if not the most significant geographical organization of academic geographers in the world. What ideas would you like to share concerning the nature of that leadership role?
Yeah.
I mean, several thousand members of the organization, and most of them academics.
Yeah. So, I have absolutely loved being in the AAG presidential rotation, which is funny because it had never occurred to me to try to get involved in AAG. I came from a department that people weren't involved in AAG in the leadership. Julie Winkler, who came for an external review, not the one I referred to, but a different external review at IU, she, I think, nominated me to be on the honors committee, or someone nominated me to be on the honors committee, and I did that. And boy, was the honors committee my happy place. Like, I got to tell you, the idea that what we're doing is celebrating people's accomplishments, I was like, oh yeah, that is where I want to be. But that kind of got me into thinking about AAG more. And what I'll say about being in the presidential rotation is that it's this kind of beautiful soft power job, right? You actually have no ability to tell AAG, the organization, to do anything, right? But what you have is this moment of being able to argue for what counts as wisdom and best practice in our field, right? So, I'll point to two things that I've been really excited about, or maybe actually three things quickly that I've been really excited about working on. So one is, I was giving a talk at University of Tennessee at Knoxville and having lunch with grad students there, which is always so interesting to me at different institutions to hear what people are thinking about and doing. And one of the students said, at other big organizations, annual meetings, like at the American Meteorological Society, they have an entire day devoted to undergraduate and graduate students. And it would be so great if AAG did that. To which, boy, I thought that was such a brilliant idea. I don't know what your experience of AAG was like of the annual meeting when you were a student, Mike, but I was so alienated and so overwhelmed. I felt like, oh my gosh, there are 9,000 people here and I know no one. And so I just thought that was a great idea. And, it turned out that AAG was already doing so much stuff for students, but somehow, people weren't really clear on it. The students didn't always know like that. So this year in Hawaii, at the annual meeting in Honolulu, we started a student day. And I think there's still work to be done, but it went really well. And it's something that AAG is carrying forward. So that's the kind of building the community of geography by starting with the people that need kind of could most benefit from support. That was super cool to me. A second thing that I've been working on that, again, I'm just really excited about as a way of supporting others is, the idea of having formal support from geography for people that do community-based research. So whether that's participatory mapping or participatory GIS, or, people that are doing all kinds of wonderful work around environmental justice with communities, right? That work is not as valued in academia as peer review publications. So we're used to evaluating work that's been, published in a journal or published through an academic press. But how do you evaluate work that's been done through years of meetings with communities that doesn't result in a written document, right? So a lot of other disciplines have formally supported that kind of work, but geography hasn't yet. So I've been working on that with a wonderful group of people on the Public and Engaged Scholarship Task Force. And then kind of related to that, the last thing that I am really excited about is changing the model of how we do annual meetings to make it much more engaged in place. With the exception of field trips, most of our geography annual meetings, they might have taken place in one city, but it didn't matter so much where they were, except for how long it took your airline to get there and what weather you would get when you got outside of the convention center, right? But in Honolulu, we really changed the model to center local concerns, local issues, long histories of colonialism, and how do you respond to that? We did all these webinars leading up to it to help people who wanted to learn more about the history of indigenous culture, of Kanaka Maoli, Indigenous Hawaiians, their ecological knowledge, their histories, their struggles, their political victories, like all that. And then we had so much local engagement within the opening plenary and various speakers and the closing ceremony. It was just really, really cool. Like it was that place-based model seems to me to make so much sense for geographers because we're all so curious about where we are, right? And I think that model is really going to roll forward for Detroit. Like already from listening to the planning for that, in terms of who the featured speakers will be and what the conference themes will be. And like, I feel like that's such a neat change for the annual meetings. And I'm so glad to have been able to be part of encouraging that. So
that might be a model. That might be a model that could be emulated as well in the regional meetings.
Yeah, that would be super cool. I mean, I have to say, like, one of the most fun things for me about being in the rotation for presidency has been going to the regional meetings. You know, I mentioned that the department I came from wasn't super involved in AAG. Like, they also weren't involved in the region. I had no idea that there were regions until I got to IU, right? That there were these regional divisions within geography, not that there were regions of the world. But the regional meetings are great. They are so interesting and so just like, I don't know, like I feel like I'm getting to talk to people that, you know, because the AAG annual meeting is so huge, like I mostly just see the people I already know. And it's been so great to meet new people and see what they're doing. But I think having that kind of engaged approach could be great for the regional meetings.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly, you know, and it's important that you relate these ideas because this is one way for us to share the role of geographers, you know, in academe, but also to facilitate understanding within the geographical community. Our discipline is not static. We must continue to evolve, and we must continue to express some concern for society and the environment.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, the other piece I'll say about this that I really like about this engaged model is that, you know, I've spent, starting from working on the Rosgan Wars, I've spent most of my career thinking about knowledge that's produced outside the academy and how important that is. And one of the things that I really loved about the model for Honolulu was that we really showcased knowledge that was super relevant and interesting to geographers, but was not produced within academia. And I think that as a model moving forward is going to be really interesting. Just because, I mean, I feel like, you know, the definition of a geographer to me is someone who's just voraciously curious about the world around them. You know? And I think this is a way to keep growing and changing the discipline through engaging outside of it as well as within it.
Well, we certainly want to facilitate this notion of geography being important for geographical knowledge being important to better global citizens, public citizens in the U.S. And, you know, everyone really does have a little bit of a geographer within them. We just want to make that blossom a bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and I think about just the work that my colleagues, my wonderful colleagues at IU do, and it's related to so many things that people care about outside the academy, right? So we have people working on immigration. We have people working on housing justice. We have people working on, you know, climate change and drought and flooding, and you know, it's just so much that is so relevant. I feel like, you know, and it's one of the most appealing things to me about geography is that the issues that we think about are so central to how other people experience the world and what things they care about.
Well, and these are things that captivate students' interests as well. These are the things that really raise the questions within them. Hey, maybe I could do this. You know, maybe I should do this instead of pursuing a field that emphasizes engaging in transactions and embracing transactional behaviors. Yeah.
I was the director of undergraduate studies and here at IU for like in my department for 8 years. And I still remember one time at the undergraduate major fair where like all the different departments and programs have a table and the undergraduates are wandering around. And I remember, so I would work at the table, but I would have geography majors at the table with me, because my experience was that students were much more interested in hearing each other than they were from hearing from me. And I remember having, one young woman walk by and are saying, "Oh, so, what are you interested in? What are you looking for in a major?" And she said, "I want to change the world." And the geography majors behind the desk said, "Me too." And I was like, okay, yeah, that's how we get our majors. These are the people who want to engage and change things really broadly. It's great.
Well, it's a rewarding profession, and because we're able to pursue the passion that we have to make positive changes, to make the world a better place, step by step.
Yeah. And that's so awesome. And, I feel like one of the things that I've learned is that there are these different avenues for how to do that, right? There's the work that we do in classrooms, which to me is so important in terms of encouraging students to think differently about the world around them. There is the work we do in our departments and universities in terms of working to make our departments and campuses better places. And then, there's work through organizations like AAG. Like, we're lucky to have a disciplinary association that's really cool. I just got to say, like, we have good people working there, and it's really interesting. And then there's the direct work with communities that so many geographers do. We did a survey of people who do engaged scholarship, and it was in every subfield of geography, including many physical geographers. Like, it's across the whole spectrum.
Well, so we have a broad field, and we're engaged in many activities and many endeavors.
Yeah.
We have about a minute or two to go here, and I'm going to ask you to please consider the path that you've trod, and to reflect on the things that we've talked about and other things that may come to mind, but consider advice you might give to a prospective undergraduate interested in geography, or a graduate student struggling to complete a degree, whether it's a master's degree or a doctorate, and even colleagues in the field. You have a wealth of knowledge. You have addressed a number of issues in your career. What words of wisdom are you willing to share?
Yeah. I'm just going to say I find that a tough question. But what I would say is, I have not had a linear path at all in my career. Academia is my second career. I've done many other things. And so I guess the first message I would want to say to people is, like, it's going to be okay. Like, for people that are maybe not on that, like, okay, I'm going to do this and then this and then this and this straight, perfect pipe. Like, there's a lot of beauty and entertainment and interest to be found in unconventional pathways. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say is that, I always feel like my life is better and richer when I am working on supporting and encouraging positive change in the world around me. And so I think academia can be very isolating and individualizing. And I think fighting against that is so important. And, whether that's just taking a colleague out for lunch or reaching out to someone whose paper you read that you thought was really interesting and just saying thank you and maybe starting a conversation, like, just feel like all those things enrich life so much.
Well, those are actually very, very, very inspiring words, because I think that you hit the nail on the head. It could be just going to lunch or relating to someone about something you read that really hit you in a very profound way.
Yeah. And I think, just thinking of your role in the world as one of, positive change and appreciation out there, I think it's a really, really good role, and it's a very rewarding role in terms of just how you feel about yourself and the world at the end of the day.
Well, and expressing care, essentially.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Most definitely.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a great pleasure to spend this time with you.
Thank you, Mike. I find myself feeling a little shy about these questions, but also it's really lovely to get a chance to reflect and to think. So I really appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Your episode will be viewed or listened to by many. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike.
And this concludes this episode of Conversation with a Geographer. Thank you.